Hey, I'm Brad. I'm with Rapid Interface. At Rapid Interface, we manufacture a lot of decals, but we don't install very many of them. So I went out into the field to learn how to do a wet installation on a large excavator. All of us know that the only way you learn is by making mistakes. And in this video, I make a lot of mistakes. Hopefully watching me screw it up keeps you out of the weeds when you're installing our decals on your project. If you're looking for a quick how-to video, this isn't it. You're going to want to check out one of our other videos if you're looking for that. This video shows me doing 3 wet decal installations on a large excavator. Hopefully seeing all my mistakes is helpful. Thanks a lot. The first thing I want to say as advice to you is if you can do your installation indoors, you're going to want to do that. You can pull your equipment into a shop, take the time to do it. When you do an installation outdoors, there's wind, weather, cold, and a few things that you might not be able to expect. One of my installs had chickens wandering around. I would have never expected chickens. So I headed out from the shop and went into the country to install some decals on an excavator. The first installation or application that I did was on the side of the excavator. I didn't have to remove a decal or anything. CBI Excavating, which is run by a nice guy named Greg, was kind enough to let me use their excavator to show off how to apply these decals. My first install didn't go too smoothly, and I wasn't real happy with how it turned out, but there's a lot to learn here. I did a couple things right though. One thing I did is have a checklist before I headed out to the site so I didn't forget anything. And the other thing I did is I cleaned the surface off really well. We've got a good cleaning process we use here, which uses soap and water, and then plain water to rinse the soap off, and then IPA, or isopropyl alcohol. The isopropyl alcohol is going to clean off any residue or anything else that might get in the way of a good clean surface. You want to manage that surface as best you can so that the decal lays down nice and even. When you clean the area that you're going to be applying the decal to, you want to clean the area around where the decal will go also. So give it a nice thorough cleaning. I'm using blue painter's tape to paint the bottom alignment line. It worked pretty well. I had duct tape with me too, just in case the painter's tape wasn't sticking. Duct tape will stick to almost anything, but it can be a real hassle to work with. Our big decals come with a alignment box around the outside. Here I am cutting it so that it's easier to line up with the blue painter's tape. I wish I'd done this back at the shop. It was a real hassle to do on site. On this install I tried getting the entire graphic lined up in one shot. If I had it to do over again, I'd tape it up with just a couple tabs of blue tape, try to get an idea of where it was at left to right, mark that, and then take it down and worry about lining it up with that bottom blue tape mark. But I just decided to put my head down and try to power through. But I finally got it done, all lined up where it needs to be. Once you have it lined up where you want it, you're going to want to tape a midline down the graphic. And you're also going to want to make sure that you have all of your tools on hand. I just rushed through this. You got to remember that once you peel the backer off, that release liner, that sticky side is exposed, and then you're playing for keeps. You could ruin the whole decal if you don't have everything handy. When you peel the backer off of the decal, you want to leave the alignment frame on the masking. The masking is that paper layer that holds the decal all lined up. With wind like this, it's good to tape the backer up and also tape the decal and the masking up while you cut the backer and then fold it under. Folding the backer under like this is worth taking the time to do. I'm really glad that I did it. It saved me a big hassle. My spray bottle broke on the drive down and I didn't notice it until I got to this point. It was really frustrating. I kind of wish that I'd had a second spray bottle. You need a good mist on the decal and also on the surface that you're applying the decal to. If you take a bucket of water and just poured it on everything, it wouldn't work as well because it wouldn't bead up the way you need it to. Having a good mist on the surface you're applying to and also on the decal makes a big difference in how easy it is to work with everything. A good spray bottle could make all the difference. I laid down the decal and then tried pressing the fluid out of it. If I'd had a good mist from my spray bottle, that would have worked just fine. It's best to press the fluid out as you lay it down if you can. Then you avoid a whole bunch of bubbles. But if you've got a good mist, you don't have to worry about that. It's a pretty forgiving process when you do a wet application. And here I didn't have an applicator on hand, so I just took a card out of my pocket and pressed the fluid out. Keep in mind you don't want to press within an inch or two of the fold under seam. If you do, you can end up getting wrinkles that are really hard to get out. The wind was nasty and the surface was wet, and I needed to dry it off and tape it down to make sure it didn't move around too much. My spray bottle got me here again, and the wrinkles you see on the decal would have came off just fine if I'd had a good spray, but I didn't. I rubbed the fluid out as I went. A few places had some wrinkles, and I had to mess with it later on. Usually I spray and soak the paper masking, so it's easier to remove it from the decal, but here I just soaked it the only way I could. And of course, I took the time to rage at the nozzle, because why not, I guess. You're going to want to grab a dry towel and peel the alignment frame and the masking away from the decal. You don't pull it away from the surface that you've applied to as much as you pull it parallel to the surface. Dry as you go and rub the bubbles out as you need to. Sometimes you need to press the decal down through the masking to get it to stick well, and then remove the masking again. If I'd had a good spray, the wrinkle in that E would have been a lot easier to deal with. That capital I here looks like hell, and I try to fix it, and it doesn't end up working as well as I'd like. I end up stretching it out. Decals are pliable, so you can stretch them over a surface, but it also means that you can deform them when you don't really want to. There's a couple bubbles there that you can see as well. If I had a good spray, I'd be able to rub them out. The capital B there, I didn't mess with it. It just didn't turn out very well. I was afraid that I'd deform it even worse. When I traveled back the next day, the whole installation looked a lot better than it does here. But this install is more of an example of what not to do. I guess I'd sum it up by saying if you can do an install indoors, do it. And if you don't have a good spray bottle, it's going to be a little dicey. I came back to the site on another day for the second installation, which we had to do on the back side of the excavator. There was a decal on it that we had to remove, and it was a lot more work than I ever would have guessed. It was a metallic foil that they used, and it kept peeling off in little tiny pieces. It was a total hassle. So if anyone ever asks you to take a decal off, just remember, it takes a lot more time than you'd ever guess at. Greg was nice enough to help with the decal removal. It was such a pain in the backside that I think I might end up doing a whole different video on decal removal. We used our fingernails and way too much determination to get the decal off. Once we got the decal removed, there was a bunch of gummy stuff stuck to the surface. I really like to use this Goo Gone to remove the gummy stuff. It works great. Sometimes when the Goo Gone doesn't work as well, for some reason isopropyl alcohol works pretty well. Greg said that brake fluid can work really well too. Once all the sticky stuff was gone, I did the 3 liquid cleaning process. Soapy water, then plain water, and finally isopropyl alcohol. And I really can't stress this enough. You want to clean the surface before you apply the decal, and you want to clean it really well. This time I tacked the decal up quickly to align it and get the location for the lower left corner of the decal. This went a lot smoother than last time, and I'm glad that I tacked it up quickly once, got my alignment, and then got ready to do the full tape up after that. The whole point of the quick tack up process is to get a general sense of where it's going to go. I put a tape mark on the lower left corner of where the decal will be so I know how it's going to line up to the surface, left to right. The excavator had some chipped paint in the lower right corner there, so I needed to make sure that I didn't apply over that yucky part of the surface. The blue painter's tape worked great for the alignment line. The tape up was a little harder than I wanted it to be, with the wind and all that other stuff. Also, I thought the back of the excavator only bent around from left to right. It ended up that it also bent a little north to south, so it was more of a gradual curve of a cone than a gradual curve of a cylinder. So aligning it required that I cheat up in the middle on the bottom tape line. The bottom left corner and the bottom right corner were right on the tape line, so it looked symmetrical when I was done. Taping the midline with blue painter's tape worked well for all of the decal applications. I'm glad I did that. I took a second to pause and get all my materials together and get prepped for removing the backer from the decal, because once you take the backer off and expose that sticky side on the decal, it's possible you'll screw it up and ruin the decal. This is a good time to take a pause and not rush. I grabbed the slip solution, a dry towel, and the scissors. Well, look at that. I remembered the applicator this time. I taped everything up this time. The fold under of the backer really helps to make it easier. I'm always glad that I take the time to do that. Spray the surface and the decal with slip solution. A light press down followed by a firm press down to push the slip solution away worked pretty well. For the second half of the application process, I taped the decal up before spraying it. The wind was really unpredictable, and I think this really helped. I think if I had it to do over again, I would have pressed the fluid out from the left to the right as I went, instead of laying the whole thing down and then pressing the fluid out after I had it laid down. But the benefit of the wet process is that you can do it either way. If you have a good spray down from the spray bottle, you should be able to do it either way. It's pretty forgiving. The paper masking wrinkled up a bunch here, but the decal didn't wrinkle much at all, so I focused on how the decal was laying down. A good soap for the masking makes the masking removal a lot easier. That alignment border made handling the masking a lot easier, especially with the wind. I peeled the alignment border off along with the masking, and I make sure that I don't grab the decal when I'm taking the masking off. Again, if you can, you want to do your application indoors. This ladybug could have just as easily landed on the sticky side of the decal before I applied it. In the end, I think this one turned out really well. For the third installation, Greg lowered the arm so I could try and get at it. He wanted to remove the cat decal on the arm and then put his decal in place of it. I couldn't reach up there, so he and I had to think about how we might get up there. I really wished I'd had a ladder at this point. Greg thought he could move it over to a different place on the location so we could reach the arm. I'm not sure every excavator could move it around that well, but he sure could. And he got to a spot where I could reach the arm, and he could too. And the two of us started working on removing the decal. Man, I gotta give it to the guys at CAT. They don't mess around making sure their decals stay on. This took forever. We used razor blades, Goo Gone, brake fluid, and it took way too long. I think I'm going to do a video on how to remove decals at some point because this decal removal really sucked. I was really glad Greg was there for this part because I planned on lining the decal up with the bottom of the arm, but he wanted it lined up to the top. It just didn't look right. So Greg stood back and talked me through where to put it, kind of like when you're hanging a picture on a wall. The arm was narrow on one side and wider on the other, so just eyeing it up was really the way to go. If Greg hadn't been there, I'm not sure he would have been as happy with how it turned out when we were done. I think we'll get together some other videos that go through a much more linear process of how to install the decal. It'll be more of a how-to than a my experiences screwing this up sort of format. My big takeaways from this process were, 1, you want to do the installation indoors if you can. There's just too many random things that happen when you're outside. The second thing is I was really glad that I had a checklist with me so that I had all my materials before I got there. If you don't have a good applicator or a good spray bottle, things can be a total mess. The third thing is decal removal is a real pain in the posterior. If you quote a project out for a flat rate and it involves decal removal, you're going to want to quote it high. This was way more difficult than I had ever expected. 4, you're going to want to take a pause before you remove the backer and expose the sticky part of that decal. I was always glad I took a moment here to gather myself and just take a real quick pause. If I take a pause at that point, then the rest of the install goes smoother and faster. And the last thing I'd say is, if you can swing it, you want to have an extra decal with you in case something goes wrong. Sure, the decal isn't free, but if something goes wrong, you might have an unhappy customer on your hands while you're ordering another decal. Also, what's your time worth if you have to order an extra one later on? If you don't end up using that extra decal when you're done, you can give it to your client and they can use it for something else like their office or another vehicle. Sometimes just a little bit of material investment can save you a lot of pain or reduce the risk of a project. Thanks a lot. I hope this video was helpful to you.